Hello, BookTube. I was going to start this video off with another update for you, a tactical and strategic update on the status of the OGBG Book Haul Wars, the Old Geezers Book Group Book Haul Wars, where a bunch of lifelong bookworms and I have been engaged in dueling book hauls over the course of months, stealing marches on each other and sneaking out at the last minute to do a quick reconnaissance of used bookstores in the area. I was going to give a brief update on that before I give you yet another book haul today. But then I got an email from one of you. I leave my email on every video, and I welcome hearing from you on any subject. And I got an email from one of you. I asked to make sure that I could read it out loud. That pretty much puts paid to the OGBG Book Haul Wars. It pretty much puts them in their perfect context. I wanted to read that to you. This person says, what have we got here? Where did it go? Yes, there you go. I have watched you and Jason and Mark, that's Jason Harrigan of Jason Has Books, and Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads, and all the other OGBGers book hauling for weeks and weeks now. And I have to say, aren't you ashamed of the way you're behaving? All of you are the elder statesmen of BookTube, and here you are going at each other like schoolboys in a playground. I think it's disgraceful. Please never stop. That pretty much sums things up. That's what these OGBG book hauls were. Just a reflection of the fact that when we're not in a severe lockdown, we all go out and get books. Not just us, but all of us. All the rest of you too. We're all in the OGBG, and we're all out there book hauling whenever we can. And let's be honest, in these particular days, it keeps us sane. and that is what I did today. I had an errand that I had to run out in the real world, and it had to be done in a specific location at a specific time. It wasn't anywhere near my usual haunts, but it was within striking distance of a bunch of charity shops and secondhand shops of one kind. Not the Brattle Book Shop, but a whole bunch of other places. So I went, and I went with just my eyes closed and my wallet open, just to show me what you have, show me what you can show me. And I got a bunch of books that I want to show you, and I also have a Steve anecdote because the first of these places that I went to was fairly big. Not just books, it was everything. It was cutlery and wall hangings and clothes of all kinds. I really ought to go back and give it more time. But I shopped around. I said hi to the clerks, of course. I say hi to everybody. I am, mask or no mask, I am a very gregarious, outgoing old coot. I got a bunch of stuff. And when I was at the register near the front door, a woman came in with a little dog on a leash, a little thing smaller than Frida. I think a Pomeranian mix of some kind or other, a fluffy little thing. And the dog was throwing conniption fits. Didn't want to come in the door, dragging its tiny little feet, sort of thrashing around, looking at everybody suspiciously, alarmed, just out of sorts. Didn't want to be there. And a moment looking at the owner gave me the clear impression that she also was completely flustered, that she wasn't expecting the dog to behave this way, and sort of wanted to just come into the shop. And just to be nice, just because I say nice things to everybody, I start conversations with strangers all the time. I said, "Boy, you have your hands full, don't you?" And she was exasperated, and she said to me, "I don't know what's wrong with her. She's usually much better than this. I wanted to come in and look around, but if she's acting like this, I can't do it. We can't stay like this." And I said, well, why don't you let me sit with her while you go shop? I'm not pressed for time. I'd be happy to do it. And she said, "Oh, that's really sweet of you, but she's not friendly with strangers, and I don't know how that would work." And I hear that a lot. If you watch this channel, I hear that a lot, all day, every day. It feels like, and I know what to do. I don't bother trying to logistics the owner. When I hear that, I go straight to the source. So I squatted down and looked at the little dog and said, "Is that true, babykins? Or do you not like people?" And by this time, she already knew that she liked me, and the dog, I mean, not the owner, already knew that she liked me. And when I said that, she went just nuts and bottle rocketed into my sternum and was rubbing her little tiny little face and her tiny little nose all over me, and I was doing likewise. And I stood up from my squat with the dog in my arms and said, but she's just fine. I'll just stand right here. I'll talk to the cash register, and I'll just stand right here. She'll be fine. Go ahead and shop. The owner, of course, was flabbergasted. They usually are. She was wide-eyed and said, I have never seen her behave that way with anyone. Are you sure it's all right? Are you sure you're not pressed for time? I said, no, I would be happy to. We will just hang out here together while you go shop. Just take your time. And so she went off. She thanked me a few more times and then went off. And I was holding the dog. The dog's name was Peaches. And I was holding Peaches in my arms like a baby. She was, most dogs don't like that, but she was perfectly okay with it. She liked it. So her tiny little feet were up in the air, and her tiny little black nose was right at my face. And she would give me these tiny little bat licks with her tongue, over and over and over again, and she was paddling the air with her paws, and it was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Imagine someone thinking they were imposing on me to put me through that. And naturally, at a couple of points, I couldn't help but ask Peaches about her owner, because in many, many cases, a dog that is easily flustered, or especially a dog about whom their owner has to say they don't really like people, is really conflicted about their owner. It's the owner that's usually the problem in a situation like that, not the dog. Dogs have been bioengineered over the course of 200,000 years to be friendly to humans. If you have a dog who's reflexively not friendly to humans, something has gone wrong somewhere along the way. It's not like really in a totally natural state there's any such thing as a naturally unfriendly dog. But then again, maybe I would say that, wouldn't I? One way or another. Peaches had nothing but glowing praise to convey about her owner. Just glowing praise. This is a very, very happy and well cared for dog, which of course made me even more grateful. The owner can't possibly have known it, but she was doing me the favor. So I was just we were just standing like that for a while until the owner came back. She had a few shirts, a pair of shoes, a couple of other things like that, a basket full of stuff. And she said, "Is everything all right?" And I said, "Yes, everything's fine. Go ahead and pay, and then I'll hand over little Peaches." So she did. I handed over the dog, and the owner was very grateful. She said, "Oh, I hope we meet again. This was wonderful." I didn't want to tell her that there's a strong likelihood that Peaches will go right back to barking at humans. She'll learn that on her own. But then it was time for me to check out. I had only been stopping to chat, so I shoved I had a pile of books and stuff on the counter. I shoved it all over to the woman at the register, and she was just staring at me. I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "That was really nice of you to do. I think you should know I'm going to discount and then we'll use the word crap. I'm going to discount the crap out of your books." And she did, but I was telling her the whole time, I was the one who benefited from this whole thing. You didn't need to do anything, and that woman didn't need to do anything. I was the one who was getting something out of meeting Peaches. Of course, I had to explain the smells all over my coat to Frida when I got back here. That didn't go well. But that's your dog anecdote. I got to babysit with somebody so that their human could go and shop in the store. That was a lot of fun. And I couldn't have done it if Frida was with me, of course, because maybe we could have hung out together, because she's very loud and bossy towards other dogs. She wants them to know that she's there, and she wants them to admit that she wants them to defer to her, because since she was a tiny little puppy, on her first walks outside, every single dog that she meets defers to her. And I'm not going to break it to her that they're not really deferring to her. I'm not going to break it to her any more than I've ever broken it to any of my other dogs. I never tell them that that's not actually what's happening. So Frida just assumes that all other dogs must defer to her. And some of them don't. Some of them don't particularly want to. They're perfectly happy to bend a leg to me, but they draw the line at deferring to this tiny 10-pound ball of lint. So, and Frida's never aggressive in those cases. She is a friendly dog. She would never, ever, under any circumstances, bite another dog or even really show aggression. I've never seen her bare her teeth to another dog. She's just loud and bossy. That's all. So we probably could have, the three of us, hung out, her and Peaches and me. We probably could have, but one way or another, she wasn't with me, so I got to just snuggle to my heart's content. And I got a bunch of books. And I wanna show them all to you, especially since I may have to live on these books during a storm. It looks like Boston is going to be getting some snow overnight and during the day tomorrow. Probably not all that much, but one can dream. I have plenty of books there anyway. And the first few books that I want to show you are mass market paperbacks. This has come up a few times in 2021, where I have mentioned that mass market paperbacks, especially good ones, are getting rarer and rarer. They're getting harder and harder to find, and that makes perfect sense. That's just simple attrition. They aren't made anymore in anywhere like the numbers that they once were. Once upon a time, they were the thing. They were the it phenomenon in the publishing industry. The whole think pieces in the Atlantic Monthly about what paperbacks, the paperback revolution is what it was called, is doing to our reading and to our publishing. That was a time when you could go into a bookstore or a drugstore or a train station and get a mass market history of the United States or Bismarck or Napoleon or whatever. That was when you could go. All romances were published in mass market. All science fiction and mystery were published in mass market. There was hardly any talk for decades about science fiction and mystery especially being published in anything else. Science fiction especially. I remember when science fiction started being regularly published in hardcover and people thought it was weird. Aside from like the Science Fiction Book Club, of course it came out as a mass market paperback. And mass market paperbacks, not only have they stopped being made in those kind of numbers, but they were never made to be eternal. They were made cheaply so they could be sold cheaply. So it stands to reason that simple attrition is going to make good mass market, interesting mass market paperbacks harder and harder to find. Once upon a time, they were the whole of what you would see in a used bookstore. Not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. So when I see interesting mass market paperbacks, not just waterlogged Tom Clancy, I grab them. And the first one of these is going to test something in this room that you can't see. Up there on that bookcase, there are all of those old Bantam mass market paperbacks of a particular cover design, a particular era that I really like, for Moby Dick or James Fenimore Cooper, although I don't have any of those at the moment. Jane Austen, although I don't have any of those at the moment. Mark Twain, all that sort of stuff. One of you sent me one of those for the Nick Adams stories of Ernest Hemingway. And I got a lot of emails, including from the sender, saying, your reaction was not what I was expecting. I wasn't trying to get your goat, but I thought I'd at least get a lecture about sending you Hemingway. But I find a lot of his short stories I find fairly controlled. Usually explicitly controlled by the market, where he doesn't get to do just whatever the hell he wants. And when he doesn't get to do whatever the hell he wants, Hemingway, the working artist, comes out and isn't quite so self-indulgent. And the person who sent that book and a bunch of other people were emailing saying, boy, so you love these old Bantams so much that you'll read an author in them that you don't particularly like. And today I saw something, I laughed. Looking at the shelf, I chuckled out loud because of book 2. Because this is an even more extraneous example of exactly that. This is one of those old Bantam paperbacks, and it's Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This is, for American readers, this paperback, or American readers of a certain age, this paperback will be as familiar as the hallways of your old high school. This was assigned by the pallet load in high schools. This particular mass market paperback was in high schools all across the country. If you're of a certain age, you read Of Mice and Men when you were in high school, and this is the paperback that you read. And I didn't have it. I haven't had this in forever. In fact, seeing it brought back memories. This particular design brought back memories. So I grabbed it, and I will reread it, and we will see. And then this next one, also a mass market that I've seen many, many times, but haven't had in a long time. This is 3 by Flannery O'Connor. Wise Blood, A Good Man is Hard to Find, and The Violent Bear It Away. Those of you who may have been on the live stream of Noah at Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, he's forever going on and on about this Flannery O'Connor guy, so I thought I'd give his fiction a try. And this has a paper in it from 1996 from House of Our Own bookstore on Spruce Street in Philadelphia. And I'm wondering if that still exists. Is House of Our Own bookstore still is still extant in Philadelphia. Any of you know? But haven't had this mass market paperback in forever, so I grabbed it, of course. Then this next one, oh my, in some ways the find of the day. This is Star Trek, and this is The Fate of the Phoenix by Sondra Marshak and Myrna Culbreth, with the old Fate of the Phoenix cover. That's a masked Romulan man holding hands with a begowned Romulan woman with a Romulan bird of prey in the sky over Romulus. No Kirk, no Spock, no McCoy, no Enterprise, no nothing. It's a totally non-Star Trek cover, or sidelined Star Trek cover. There are no icons of the show on here. And this is a reprint itself. This is not this logo up top here shows you that this is a reprint. The first printing of this didn't have this up top. It still had this cover. And all the reprints after this, of course, don't have this cover, because it doesn't say Star Trek. Nothing about it says Star Trek except the bird of prey up in the sky there, if you happen to know your Star Trek really well. But it does speak to the novel. Those of you who know this novel, and it's the first book, The Price of the Phoenix, and this is the sequel, The Fate of the Phoenix. Those of you who know these books, and I don't imagine any of you do, will know right away who the masked Romulan on this cover is. So rather pivotal plot point. And the female Romulan is the Romulan commander from the Enterprise incident in the original Star Trek show, where we meet a female Romulan fleet commander. She isn't just in control of her own starship. And keep in mind, she is in control of starships, but this was long before anybody connected with Gene Roddenberry or even Dorothy Fontana suggested that a woman could ever command a starship. The highest we got was lieutenant commander. Long before that was true in the Federation, it was true outside the Federation. We for instance, we see a high-ranking female Klingon science officer in the Day of the Dove. But in the Enterprise incident, we see a female Romulan commander who's in command of 3 ships. She's in command of a battle group. And she's a terrific, terrific character, just beautifully portrayed. We never learn her name, but she is fascinating, able to go toe-to-toe with Kirk and Spock throughout the whole of the episode. And Sondra Marshak and Myrna Culbreth draft her as a main character in The Price of the Phoenix, the novel before this one, which is classic old pre-movie, pre-Paramount, pre-lawyers, pre-rule book Star Trek fiction. It's not quite fan fiction, although there is the requisite sadomasochistic torture, which existed in so much of the fan fiction, and which is a prominent part, plays a prominent role in The Price of the Phoenix. The Price of the Phoenix is about a towering bad guy named Omni, O-M-N-E, who, among many other technological wonders, has developed the Phoenix device, which is a melding of the Star Trek transporter process, and specifically the transporter buffer. In Star Trek, the transporter breaks you down into an energy stream, all of you, your memories, your thoughts, your reactions, right down to the minute characters transport in mid-sentence. It breaks all that down into an energy stream, passes it through a transporter buffer, and then reconstitutes it at its destination. Omni takes that technology plus the technology of the Star Trek replicators that can reconfigure the mass of matter, for instance, to replicate food or equipment or something like that. Omni takes those technologies and melds them together over decades of trying to come up with a device that duplicates a person. So the transporter doesn't move you from place to place. It moves you to another you that becomes another you. And it's not a clone. It's not an android. It's not an easy duplicate. It is you exactly right up until the moment when you enter the Phoenix process. It's exactly the same, indistinguishable. And Omni is an agent of chaos. He is not a good guy. He wants to sell it to the highest bidder. He wants to disrupt the galaxy, which he sees as suffocating under the benevolence of wall-to-wall empires. The Romulan Empire, the Klingon Empire, and the Federation, which he has a special scorn for. And it's up to Kirk and Spock and the Enterprise and the Romulan commander to face him, to face Omni. The book Price of the Phoenix starts off with one of the best beginnings of any Star Trek novel in existence, and it only keeps going from there. God, talk about a novel where there is no moment to catch your breath. Not a moment. In addition to all of his genius and his evil and his chaos, Omni is also physically impressive. He's tall, he's massively muscular, And he has blue-green blood. He is Vulcanoid. He's not from Vulcan, but he's from an offshoot. So he has the higher muscle density, the higher bone density. He is stronger, faster, just like Spock is in Star Trek. So that all throughout the books, as you're wondering how Captain Kirk is going to face this guy strategically and tactically, you know, because this is old style Star Trek. New style Star Trek novels, nothing is allowed to happen in the plot. But in old style Star Trek, stuff happens all the time on every page. And you know almost from the first page of The Price of the Phoenix that the climax, one of the climaxes of The Price of the Phoenix, will be a fist fight, a physical battle between Spock and Omni. And that does happen, and it is incredible. And at the end of The Price of the Phoenix, I won't spoil it in case 50 years later one of you wants to stumble across it. At the end of The Price of the Phoenix, there is the obvious open question, which is, will Omni trust the Phoenix device to be used on himself? Because if his technology fails, the man who fears death more than anything will die. But there's no way, it's his own technology, it's all automated, he doesn't trust anyone. So sooner or later, he's going to have to take the chance on whether or not this technology can save him, can make a new Omni. And some answer to that question will be obvious from the fact that there is a sequel to Rise of the Phoenix. It's almost twice as long as the original, and so good. Oh my, so good. And I am never going to see, once upon a time, you could go into a used bookstore and come across stuff like this all the time. You're never going to see this stuff. It's going to get to the point in 10 years where this is wildly, wildly unlikely to walk into a store and just see this sort of thing. This was, I think, 25 cents, and that was before it had the crap discounted out of it. So I have no idea what I actually paid for this, but I would imagine that if I went on, Amazon or eBay or something and looked up The Price of the Phoenix and exactly this edition with the yellowing pages and whatnot, I'd be willing to bet that the prices would start at $10 and go up from there. And that's just going to get more pronounced. The same thing is true with this next one. This is not ever going to be out of print, but still, this particular edition, this is the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have the hardcover with this cover, and I have a mass market paperback that I bought it for 10 cents a million years ago at a store that had stripped the cover off it. You sent the cover back for credit from the publisher, but some stores then turned around and sold the stripped copies there. Strictly enjoined not to do that. But some of them did, and I didn't know any better. I didn't know what that was. I just knew it was dirt cheap, so I bought it, and I didn't like it the way it was, so I made a cover of my own for it, and I have that paperback in this room. But this thing is in perfect condition. It's like the day it was made. And this mass market paperback hasn't been made in a long time. There was mass market of the Silmarillion after this that had a Michael Whelan cover, I think. It didn't show any people. It just sort of a landmass being destroyed, and that was a gold spined mass market paperback for a few years, and then they stopped. There will never be another mass market paperback of the Silmarillion. It'll only be trade paperbacks and hardcovers from now on, and ebooks. I have this as an ebook. I have the thanks to your generosity, one of you, I have the illustrated version of this as an ebook. And I have my hardcover, and I have my old mass market that I can't use anymore. It's just too brittle. But now I found this for dirt cheap, so I grabbed it on the off chance that perhaps sometime in 2021 I will need a copy of the Silmarillion. This next one is a huge history. It's just fantastic, just incredible, revelatory, on very well-trod ground. So you wouldn't think that I would be reading a book on the subject of World War II and learning something on every page, but boy, oh boy, I did. And I always give it away, so I never have a copy, so I grabbed it. This is Mark Mazower, Hitler's Empire. And these thick orange penguin spine paperbacks. Mazower writes about the Third Reich, but he writes about it from a purely economic standpoint. And you know I'm all about economics. He writes about how the Nazi Empire actually conducted business, who did its banking, what were its vital resources, what were its imports, what were its exports, how did it actually survive as a financial entity. And it's fascinating, just fascinating from beginning to end. An entire mountain of books have been written about World War II in all their aspects. But even so, if you had to draw the line, like if you were a fanatic World War II reader and you had to draw the line at 100 books, this would be on that list for sheer innovation. Same thing with Bloodlands. by Timothy Snyder. That something like that would be on the list. Just a totally new perspective, a totally fresh perspective on a whole bunch of old subjects. I haven't reread this in forever. As soon as I saw it, I realized I didn't have a copy because I'm always giving it away to people who say, I want a narrative history of Third Reich, but I've already read a couple of them, and I'm wondering if I could find me something different. Lots of people have asked me over the years, maybe the thing I want is to read a Hitler biography, and I always tell them, you don't want to read a Hitler biography, no. If you can avoid it. If you're not a book reviewer or researching a Hitler biography of your own, then there's no reason to spend that much time with the guy. But read this. Absolutely read this. So I grabbed it, and that's great. This next one, a bit unusual. Wasn't expecting it at all since it's brand new. This is a Book of the Month Club edition of Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. There is our author, who in addition to being a very good novelist, is also a very good book reviewer. So a double threat there. And this was a well-known book last year. I wonder why somebody gave it up. Is it possible that somebody just didn't like this? I have the ebook of this. I believe I have the advanced copy, an advanced paperback copy, but I wasn't going to pass up a nice hardcover for no money, basically no money. A fantastic story about a family that is renting a B&B up away from the city, when the couple that they're renting it from suddenly and unexpectedly shows up on their doorstep on the heels of what seems like a civilization ending unknown catastrophe of some kind in the outside world. Suddenly that renting family and the original family are thrown together and have no idea how to deal with each other or what the rest of the world is doing. And that's it. The book just takes off from there. I thought it was terrific. Just terrific. And then this next one is a biography that no book haul from me would be complete without a biography. This is Joan of Arc, A Life Transfigured by Catherine Harrison, which I read and I think reviewed. There was a 2 or 3 year period there where there were a lot of Joan of Arc books all of a sudden. I remember Helen Castor wrote one that was terrific. I know I wrote a review of that. But I think I wrote a review of this one as well. Joan of Arc, we know she's one of those odd historical figures where we know a lot, but we also don't know a lot. So if you're going to do a book-length study of her, a lot like Stacey Schiff's Cleopatra, if you're going to do a book-length study of her, it's going to have to be a lot of you baked into that stew. Because the amount of things that you could actually just demonically write about Joan of Arc would not fill a book this big. They wouldn't fill the introduction to this book. I think Stacey Schiff actually blurbs this. Yeah, Stacey Schiff blurbs this. I think Joan of Arc is absolutely fascinating. I've spent a good deal of time, once upon a time, back in the pre-plague days, in the Boston Public Library's Joan of Arc collection. The Boston Public Library has one of the largest Joan of Arc one of the largest literary collections of Joan of Arc stuff anywhere in the country. I spent a lot of time with that collection just poring over it, trying to figure out the amazing compulsion that this character exerts on so many people, so many figures, including famously Mark Twain, who went to his grave saying that his book on Joan of Arc, which is virtually unreadable, was his favorite of all the things that he wrote. It's the author of Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer, Innocents Abroad. He went to his grave saying that his Joan of Arc book was the best thing he ever wrote. I'm here to tell you it was not. But when I saw this, I thought, I always get a little confused because of that little fusillade of Joan of Arc books that came out about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. Actually, this will tell me when, won't it? I've got the book right in my hand. I could find out. 2014. So 10 years ago. I always get I liked one of them a lot more than I liked all the others. And I confess, I get a little confused about which one that was, although I thought they were all spectacularly good. And I remember liking this one. And I don't know if I have any other Joan of Arc biographies, so I grabbed it, especially since, keep in mind, all of these were dirt cheap. So there was no extravagance here at all. These next two, for instance, would look like extravagances if they weren't dirt cheap. These are hardcovers of something that I have praised on this channel before, and Mark Richardson has actually praised it on his channel. And I hauled a paperback version of one of these things. This is the Norton Anthology of Literature. Big brick things that are standard items in curricula here in the United States that just take you chronologically through authors. They are they are the products of a massive amount of behind-the-scenes work. It is the labors of Hercules to put one of these kinds of anthologies together, or at least it used to be. You bring together the best critics, the best scholars, the best experts on the individual works. You have long, heartfelt editorial discussions about what is going in and what is staying out. You footnote all of it. You have to contextualize all of it with text and timelines and maps. It's an amazing, amazing process. And it generated Norton anthologies that not only are absolutely indispensable one-volume libraries, but that make fantastic reading on their own, quite apart from the greatness of the literature inside them. They make fantastic reading on their own. They are great volumes. And a little while ago, I don't remember if it was 2021 or 2020, I hauled a thick paperback of one volume of the Norton Anthology of Literature. And I thought, this will do just fine. I love the paperbacks, but the paperbacks do tend to fall apart. I thought, in just a pie in the sky ideal situation, I thought what I'd really like is not just one volume, but 2 volumes, and both in hardcover, which still has the very thin, wonderful onion skin paper, but is going to last you a lot longer. That's exactly what I found. The Norton Anthology of English Literature, Volume 1 and Volume 2. So there's Volume 1, with Queen Elizabeth, the famous portrait where she's got her foot on a particular locale. And here's Volume 2 with a J.M. Turner, a moody J.M. Turner painting on the cover. And rare, talk about, I mentioned that mass market paperbacks are rarities. These are rarities too, to find with intact dust jackets, without any highlighting or marking by students. These are completely clean, both of them. So I will reinforce the paper dust jackets, get rid of that paperback, and just have these two as the most wonderful, companionable tour through English literature imaginable. They are one of the only textbook-oriented things that is so much fun to read. And they also happened before the PC hordes descended on academia in full force. They were starting to murmur around the edges when I got out. I can't imagine how modern academics that have any kind of intellectual integrity deal with it. I just can't imagine how they do. But now, these are the 4th editions. You would never get a Norton anthology like these again. No way. No way. If we were to take a tour, for instance, through Volume 1 of the Norton Anthology of English Literature, I haven't done it, but if we were to take a tour through the table of contents, you would find that because women were chattel and beaten and thrown about the room and deprived of access to libraries, deprived of schooling, deprived often of literacy, often forced to breed once a year until they died in childbirth. Because of that, because a whole segment of society was treated that way by the dominant gender in that society, you would naturally expect that in the 1,000 years covered in this volume, there would be drastically more literature, not to mention great literature, written by men than written by women. And you would be right. That is just the simple truth. If for 1,000 years one gender is denied access to writing materials, solitude, ease, education, literacy, then that gender is going to produce less literature. And a lot of the literature that the few isolated examples do produce won't be all that good. That does not make me a sexist monster, and that does not make me part of the patriarchy. I love the fact that that is all different now. I wouldn't want to go back at all. Unlike a lot of the men's movement activists on YouTube, I don't think that that is the good old days at all. Obviously, as you know, since 2/3 of the books and authors that I praised on this channel have been women. But nevertheless, it doesn't do anybody any good, especially young girls in schools. It doesn't do anybody any good to lie about that. That was the way things were for most of human history, except in the few societies where women had the chance to do something else. That was the way things were, except in isolated instances. An abbess could have the time and education on her hands to do some worthwhile writing. For instance, think of the wife of Bath from the Canterbury Tales. She is multiply widowed. She runs her own business. She's no man's plaything. She's expected not to be. Scholars have pointed out that widows, for hundreds of years, in, for instance, English history, since we're talking about the Norton Anthology of English Literature, widows did occupy a kind of weird quasi-liberation status. They weren't expected anymore to be constantly governed and chaperoned by a man. They could own property. They could own businesses. They could inherit their husband's house and not be beholden to anybody and holding on to it. They could dispense with money. That wasn't true of most other women. And so, a Norton Anthology of English Literature for the first 1,000 years, let's say, from Roman times to Spencer and Sidney, is accurately going to have very, very little written by a woman. And that isn't possible anymore. That isn't permissible anymore. In Norton anthologies or any other anthology, that isn't permissible anymore. Now, instead of those editorial groups getting together in a room and having long, earnest conversations about what's great and what's great enough to be included in this volume to be taught to school children, instead, those editorial conferences are all about counting numbers. So we're talking about the first 1,000 years of English literature, and we have room for, let's say, 200 authors. 100 of them have to be women. And there might be some crusty old guy in the room who says, well, that's absurd. There weren't 5. So what are you talking about? 100 have to be women. Where are you going to go to find them? And what kind of crap are you going to come up with when you do? He might say that once, but then he would have his tenure removed. He would have his children stalked at school. He would have his house firebombed. He would make a public, tearful apology, apologizing for everything he's ever said or done, everything he's ever written, and it wouldn't be enough. He would still end up in penury or killing himself. So no one says that anymore. And the Norton anthologies and all other literary anthologies out there in the market today reflect it. To the detriment of students who are being given a drastically wrong and impoverished view of their own literary heritage. Anyway, diatribe aside, the point was, a little bit later on, if I had found Norton anthologies a little bit later on, I wouldn't have wanted them. I might have found them in perfect condition in a hardcover with dust jacket, and I still wouldn't have wanted them. So I'm glad I found these, and now I can sort of peacefully retire that paperback. I can get rid of it. Then this next one, I have this in a trade paperback, but I've wanted it in a hardcover for a particular reason, and I checked to make sure that reason is true. This is the great Helen Vendler, one of our greatest poetic literary critics, one of our greatest critics of poetry, and this is one of her great books, The Art of Shakespeares Sonnets. This is a hardcover. It's got a little bit of a divot down there, but I can fix that. And I had sort of a ransacked and crappy paperback of this. She just goes through Shakespeare sonnets, one sonnet by one, analyzing them and writing, sometimes with soaring eloquence about them. And I had a sort of a beaten paperback of this, and it's sort of mentally on my mind that if the next time I saw an intact hardcover, I would grab it. And you might think this isn't intact because it has that little divot in there, but that's not the kind of intact I was thinking of. I was thinking of this. The hardcover has a CD in the back of the sonnets being read. And I think I have a MacBook in the other room that is old enough to have a CD drawer in it. I think I have a MacBook that can play a CD. Pretty sure that I do. Although, for all I know, and in fact, now that I think about it, it's certainly true that the recordings from that CD are on YouTube. They must be. Everything's on YouTube. But either way, I want the hardcover of this because my paperback's falling apart. And then the last one I have already, I got it again. I just grabbed it. I grab it whenever I see this particular illustrator. This is a children's picture book. A children's picture book illustrated by the great Ted Rand, who just, if you ever see his artwork on a children's picture book, you'll know you're getting great stuff. And this is Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And there is a Ted Rand illustration. His illustrations run throughout. He is so good at painting things, especially moonlight. Look what he does with moonlight. Notice that he makes it golden. And somehow, because of the palette that he uses and the way he uses shadows, it feels right. It feels natural. Even though moonlight isn't typically golden, it still feels like moonlight. He has that so well. And this is, of course, the famous poem that so many New England children had to recite from memory once upon a time. Now you can't do that. If you were to ask a New England school child to memorize something, then what's the whole point of memorizing something? It's so that you're going to recite it back. And what is the distinguishing characteristic of reciting it back? That it'll either be right or wrong. You'll either have memorized it correctly or you won't. And if little Black Lives Matter, if your little kid memorizes it wrong and then recites it wrong, and the teacher says, well, you transposed these verses or you got that word wrong, the teacher could be sued. Or drummed out of their position, and their children stalked at school, and their house firebombed, and them making a tearful apology on social media, and it not counting for anything, and them being driven to penury or suicide. You sort of get the drift here. So I imagine school children in New England aren't forced to memorize this poem anymore, but oh my, I was once upon a time, and it's so good. Perhaps I should read it to you. You thought you'd get through the day without a reading? Let's read the Paul Revere's Ride, shall we? Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land, and 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. Ooh. Then he said good night, and with a muffled oar silently rowed to the Charlestown shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset, British man-of-war, a phantom ship, with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black bulk that magnified by its own reflection in the tide. And there's the huge black bulk. And that's what the poet meant by the spars making prison bars against the bright moon. And there's the lumped city of Boston in the background, and there's the tower where the signal will be. Now, this isn't quite accurate. The Somerset would never have been completely dark like that. It had people on board, but it doesn't matter. It's the mood. It's the mood. Meanwhile, his friend through alley and street wanders and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barracks door, and the sound of arms, and the tramp of feet. He's spying the redcoats as they're getting ready to march, and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed to the tower of the old North Church by the wooden stairs with stealthy tread, to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the sombre rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of oak, by the trembling ladder, steep and tall, to the highest window in the wall, where your humble narrator has been. Where he paused to listen and look down, a moment on the roofs of the town, and the moonlight flowing over all. See what I mean? That moon is golden, and yet it feels like moonlight. It all looks that way. It's just wonderful. I don't know how Ted Rand does it. This is my favorite part. This is still the friend in the belfry. Beneath, in the churchyard, lay the dead, in their night encampments on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear, like a sentinel's tread, the watchful night wind as it went, creeping along from tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, all is well. A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead, for suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a barge of boats. There is the old granary burial ground under moonlight, and it is actually a line of boats. All the more cause for alarm. But it's neat that in the middle of the poem, this is an action poem, in the middle of the poem, Longfellow has this friend pause, because in the musty silence of the church tower, all is well. The dead are sleeping peacefully. It's almost a moment that dampens his urgency, because it feels like nothing serious can be happening. But he wakes up from the spell right away, because you can't have that. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred, with a heavy stride on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed at the landscape far and near, then, impetuous, stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. There he is. He's looking at the church, looking past the Somerset at the church, to spy his signal, which will determine what he will do. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. 1 if by land and 2 if by sea, and we saw the bridge of boats. A hurry of hoofs in the village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles in passing a spark, struck out by the steed, flying fearless and fleet. There's Paul Revere on his midnight ride. Uh, that was all, and yet through the gloom and light the fate of a nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out by the steed in his flight kindled the land into flames in the night. Has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him, tranquil and broad and deep, is the mystic, that's the river, meeting the ocean tides, and under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of his steed as it rides. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Oh my. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington and saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting-house windows, blank and bare, gaze at him with a spectral stare, as if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon, as if they were already seeing the dead that will be right underneath their windows. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the beating of the flock, and the bleating of the flock, and the twitter of birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown. And one was safe and asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be the first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest, in the books you've read, of how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall. Chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. Look at that. There he is. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For, borne on the night wind of the past, through all our history, to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will awaken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Wonderful, just wonderful. This kid's book comes with a map and everything. But this, I love this thing. I already have it in hardcover, but I grabbed it again. I can't get enough of these things, and it was cheap. Oh my goodness, look at the time. Oh my. All right, that was your book haul for today. We have the Paul Revere's Ride in a children's book. We have the Art of Shakespeare's Sonnets. We have the Norton Anthology of English Literature in 2 volumes. Wonderful, just fantastic. We have Catherine Harrison's Joan of Arc biography. We have Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. We have Hitler's Empire by Mark Mazauer. And we have a bunch of mass market paperbacks. The Fate of the Phoenix, sequel to The Price of the Phoenix. The Silmarillion, The Legendarium of Tolkien's Imaginary World. 3 by Flannery O'Connor. And finally, the Old Panton paperback of Mice and Men. So there you go. That was our used book haul for today. The pre-storm haul for today. Sorry about the length of the video. Good Lord, you're lucky I didn't pull down more Longfellow and keep reading. But I will wrap this up here, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.